everyone. This is Terri A. Wilson, and I'm here with another
And
pop-up
hear you
interview. And
again.
I'm really excited because this is season 2. I've made it the first season. Yay! Now I'm on to season 2, and I'm even more excited. I've got great, wonderful guests lined up for you. And if you are interested in being one of my guests, the best thing to do is, first of all, hit the subscribe button, because then you will get a pop-up notice every time I post a video. And they're not posted on a regular schedule. They're very random, which is hence the name Pop-Up Interviews. And that's because writers and book people have really hectic schedules. Most all of us, well, pretty much, I guess everybody these days has a hectic schedule. And so I just try to work it in when it's convenient for the speaker and for me. The other way you can do it is always go down to my website, terriawilson.com, and there's a link there that says Pop-Up Interviews. Just hit that and fill out the form. I'm really excited today. Of course, I'm always really excited because I like doing these. It's a lot of fun for me, and it gives me a chance to go out and meet people that I would not have met. Not like I can get in my car. My production cost for this show is like zero. My production budget. And so I'm excited here today. I'm talking with Jazz T. Ward. Hi, Jazz. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
And we're going to talk about all her books, and we're going to talk about everything that she does and just what makes her a wonderful person, because I've heard great things about her. I followed Jazz on Facebook for a couple of years, I think, actually. And we don't necessarily interact much, but I like following and seeing her books and seeing the things that she does. She's got a pretty cool life. I'm excited.
Oh, thank you.
So the first thing I have to say is I love your hair.
I know. Isn't it fabulous? I kind of did the gray thing. I was like, I'm going to own my years and my wisdom, and like, I'm going to own it. Yeah. But mine would come in like patches of gray and then patches of red and then patches of an odd color. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm not loving it anymore. So I just said, you know what? I'm just going to go for red. And I love it. I've had a lot of compliments on it.
I've actually been pretty lucky, knock on wood, but my grays come in like almost like highlights.
See, yours is beautiful. Mine is literally, it looked like, I don't know, it was bad. It's like I had polka dot gray. I had like patches of gray here, but then no gray, and it was a mess.
Well, and that actually brings up something that I find just really interesting. My husband recently went in for a job interview at the end of last year. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he was concerned about is because in his facial hair, his beard, he did have gray hair. And the recruiter said, I don't want to hurt your feelings or anything, but you might want to shave that off. But isn't it funny how we see people with gray hair and we instantly think they're too old, and we already stereotype them as to what they can do and what they can't do?
Right. And I think that's just in society in general. I mean, you see somebody that drives an old car, you automatically think they're not successful. Well, maybe they're just frugal and they really like that car, and I agree. Yeah, it is. And having come from the corporate world, trust me, I totally understand what you're talking about. You're judged by, things that have nothing to do with your skills or your background or what you can do.
Absolutely. Well, and I don't know about you, but I started turning gray when I was in my 20s.
Me, when I was in my mid-30s, I started getting, and my kids used to laugh. They used to sit behind me in the car and like find the gray hairs to pluck out as a game. I'm like, I really need to stop. There's not that many. And they're like, oh no, there's more. I was like, no.
Yeah. I remember the first day I had a gray eyebrow and I cried.
My son called them the witch eyebrows. He goes, you got a witch eyebrow, Mom. I'm like, hush, leave me alone.
And we won't even talk about the gray hairs in other places because this is a somewhat daytime show.
We're not going there. We're not going to go there today. Maybe we'll do like a late night show where we go there, but no, we're not going there today.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you write?
Okay, I write paranormal, sci-fi, fantasy, a little twisted, but I like to put a lot of fun in it. There's love in there, of course. There's an HEA. I got into the paranormal romance genres back with, Laurel K. Hamilton and Sherilyn Kenyon. Those are the books I love to read. Mm-hmm. And I actually started doing fan fiction around those types of books and characters. And I found my calling. I found that I liked making real yet fantastical worlds for them to live in, and it's just, I enjoy it. It may not be for everyone because I kind of like to write it different. I don't have vampires and I don't have shifters. I don't have your usual tropes in my books. I wanted to make something fresh, new, and original. And I like to think I've done that.
So you talk about fantasy, sci-fi, and paranormal. For anybody who's watching this right now who doesn't understand the differences, can you talk a little bit about that?
My world combines pretty much all of them. Fantasy is, in fact, that I created my own beings and my own world, so to speak. It's all still real time, so it's urban fantasy. In other words, it still takes place here. It takes place in a city. The sci-fi comes in because I'm a huge lover of science fiction. So I combine a bunch of technical elements. We have something called the grid, and the grid is basically a high-tech monitoring system that monitors every single cell on the planet. And it makes sure that the supernatural beings that are on the grid stay strong, but also monitors mankind. We have some very high-tech things, like we use nanobot technology, different monitoring. We'll incorporate the cities, we'll hack into the cities, camera system to monitor traffic or see bad guys getting away, or even turn the lights green so our good guys can get through to them faster than the people in the community can. And then paranormal used to be a very simple genre. It meant shifters, vampires. But because you have supernatural beings, in my case, bad guys, really, really bad guys that were brought back from hell, that says, if you behave and fight our war, we'll give you a second chance. So I say paranormal, my readers have termed it paranormal with a twist. It's not your usual paranormal. But because it has all those elements in it, I don't want to tell someone, well, it's just urban fantasy, because there's a lot of sci-fi elements, and they'll say, well, I thought it was paranormal. So I'm like, you know what, whatever you found it, as long as you found it enjoyable, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever heard of nanopunk?
Yes, I have heard of nanopunk.
So would you consider some of what you're doing as nanopunk?
To me, nanopunk swings a little more towards the steampunk, and we don't take it that fantastical, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely some elements of that in there.
Yeah. I love steampunk.
I do too. I love the art, whenever I go to conventions, I love seeing the steampunk cosplayers.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the year, which I can't talk about, it's a secret, at the end of the year, I'm actually going to give into that a little bit.
That's great.
Yes, so I'll make sure but I can't reveal yet. But at the end of the year, we're going to spin nano punk and steampunk in a whole different way, the Ward way, at the end of the year, to show my love for that. Because
it'll be Ward punk.
There you've coined it. There you go, Ward punk. It'd be Ward punk. Have you read one? Because there are some huge authors that just, as soon as you hear their name, that that's the type of book they write. Lovecraft and other different authors. So yeah, that would be cool. Ward punk. We'll call it Ward punk. I'm gonna say, this is for you. We're Ward punk.
I had a question, but it totally left my head. So I'll probably remember it like 20 minutes from now, or 20 minutes after we get off the show.
Yeah, you'd be like, hey, Jazz, get back. I was like, okay, I'm back. It's all right.
We'll have to do a part 2 with Jazz Ward. Okay, so what made you, well, first of all, the ability to be able to change the light green whenever you need it. Oh man, would I love that.
I know. Wouldn't it be they kind of abuse it though. Like, they know that the all you can eat steak night is fixing to end. So, hey, turn the light to green so I can get there. Of
course. I'm sorry, but I think if I was like a police officer or something, it would just be too tempting to not sometimes just turn on those lights and just, when you're stuck in traffic, and just drive on the shoulder when you're on the interstate. I don't know if every once in a while, I think I would just have to do it.
I'm not going to say if I have. No, I'm joking. But yes. And it's cool because in the grid, I wanted to make sure that everyone is a hero. Everyone has a chance to be a hero. So we actually, in the grid, you have policemen, EMTs, doctors, people in the city council, everyday normal neighbors who are incognito part of the grid. You know, they have their everyday normal lives, but whenever there's trouble or a battle or a fight coming on to the city of San Francisco, they are alerted and they join into the fray. And they are just as badass as any of my supernatural beings. And that's, you know, what I wanted to do. I wanted to show the heroes come in all types. You don't have to have the fangs and you don't have to have the super strength and speed. You can be a hero right there in your home, in your neighborhood, right there where you are,
Yeah.
by helping
Yeah.
others. So.
And that's important too. I think sometimes, especially with more and more urban fantasy and paranormal going to the big screen, movies, Netflix, different cable channels, even regular TV sometimes, the people on there are always beautiful.
Mhm.
They're always beautiful. And, you know, in reality, I don't think it would be that way. I mean, I don't think a vampire is going to turn down fresh meat just because they're not blonde. Do you know what I mean?
Right. I understand. And it's kind of funny that you said that because I was the same way. I was like, oh, everybody is on the covers of, you know, covers of books and in the movies. They're beautiful. They're perfect. You lust after them. They have the abs, the hair, everything. My characters are all flawed. Every single main character is flawed. The main character in the first book, Madness, had mental illness, you know, and he was trying to hide it. And he was still trying to be a hero, but he was fighting his own inner battles.
Mm-hmm.
The second book is about a woman. It's a female, just as badass and strong as everybody else, but she's a survivor of sexual assault and living from the streets, and she is not perfect in any way, you know. And then the third book, Jess, you know, he was a bad guy. He was an old west gunslinger, killer, you know, but he has his faults and his paranormal, and his, you know, paranoid and scared too. And then the last book, Murder, I mean, I wrote a person of color, you know, and we touch on, you know, racism and things of that in the last book, but he's just as badass as everybody else, but he has his problems too. And he's done some very bad things he's having to deal with. Because me personally, as a reader, I got tired of the perfect hero and the damsel in distress and the, you know, okay, the world's going to end, they're going to save it, they'll get back together, yay. So I wanted to write something different. So I wanted characters that people could identify with. So we have a huge mix of humans, you know, non-supernatural people in there that everyone can identify with. We have housewives, we have, you know, a librarian, we have, you know, different people. And I just love that about my story. And I love any story that does that, that makes it feel like it's real. Like, hey, I could be a part of this world. You know, the little mean natured Asian woman who runs that restaurant, she's part of that world, you know, and she's an older lady and there's older characters. I think more books should do that. You know, I think we need to make it where this could be my world. Yes, you want it to be fun and adventure, but it's a world that you can sink into because you feel like you can belong there. You can be
Well,
part of
and don't you think that's part of the joy of fantasy?
it. Oh, yes. I love it.
I mean, I think that I was like you. I think probably Laurel K. Hamilton. Um, who's the other person you mentioned?
Chitlin Kenyon.
Yeah, I've seen her books. I haven't read any of them, but I also read Kim Harrison and Jim Butcher when they
Yep.
were first coming out. Of course, going way back when Salem's Lot first came out, Stephen King.
Oh, yes, Stephen King. Yeah.
And even Firestarter. I mean, if you think about Firestarter as being like kind of paranormal fantasy type stuff, but I had really never touched on that genre before, which is ironic because I was a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
and then Angel came along and he was still, I mean, he was nice to look at, and that's what kept me watching that show. But when I started reading the books and seeing, especially the first Laurel K. Hamilton books, when she was like probably before she got like maybe the last 4 or 5 of them in the series, it just was fun to escape into what could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought of the question I wanted to ask you, and it's going to tie into what we're talking about right now too. I think when you do fantasy, you have the ability to create the world the way you think it should be. And you
Mhm.
hope that people will learn from that and create a world like it could be.
Right.
So I have to ask you, are you a Star Trek person or a Star Wars person?
Star Trek.
Yeah.
Star Wars is great, but even when I read fantasy, I like it to be Earth based. I don't like to be
Mm.
other planets and other races. So Star Trek goes into and that's great. And I mean, that's Star Wars. It takes place on planets I've never heard of, with beings that we'll never see. But to me, Star Trek it's always been about the human race exploring and learning more.
Right. What's
So,
your favorite one?
Captain Picard, I'm sorry, he's my heart. And
Oh yeah.
Riker, number one,
Oh
please.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, totally. I always think of I'm actually both. I like Star Trek and I like Star Wars, but the newer Star Wars aren't doing it for me the way the originals did.
Now, don't get me wrong. I love Star Wars. I love both, but if I had to pick between two, I would go see Star Trek before I go see Star Wars. And I have to agree with you. I love the original or the prequel. I get it confused, but the three originals back in the 80s,
Back in the days.
yeah, back in the days, I love those. The three that happened in the middle, I don't even acknowledge those. Like those don't even exist for me. The newer ones are good, but my man was Han Solo, and they killed off Han Solo. So
I know.
I'll never watch another one. No, never.
Um, my favorite episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation. Well, I'm a Voyager person. I mean,
I
Catherine
loved
Janeway,
Voyager too. After Next Generation, it was Voyager. I mean,
she
let's
was
give
my
me
hero. I mean, I love that
strong
show.
woman. Yes.
Yes.
So yeah.
There's my favorite episode of Star Trek was one where they were dealing with terrorism
Mm-hmm.
from a different planet. And they were talking about a terrorist never sees themselves as a terrorist. And
They see
that
themselves
made
as righteous.
so much sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because especially when you think we have so much terrorism that's going on right now, it's horrible. I mean, domestic and foreign and all kinds of stuff. But the people who are doing these things, they don't see themselves as wrong.
No, they don't. We may see them as the enemy, but they see us as the enemy. Until
Absolutely.
we learn to look through different sets of eyes and see the world and see things through a different view, it's never going to change. We're always going to be considering people enemies instead of finding out how can we make them where they're our friend or
Absolutely.
and I'm not saying we should friend, I mean, before someone blows up, I'm not saying we should friend off terrorists, but until we have an open engagement to understand, that's just going to keep happening, and
Absolutely. And I'm with you. I mean, if you kill somebody, there's a consequence to that.
yes,
And you
yes.
need to accept whatever consequence is because of your choice, that has to happen. And I totally agree with that. So I'm not saying that. I just think that we have to understand that there's a reason they hate us
Mm-hmm.
or that we hate them. And until you start addressing that reason, that beginning, it's always going to keep happening. You're
I
absolutely
mean, it's with any crime against mankind or any crime against humanity. When another person causes harm or ill content to another person, there's always a reason behind it. I mean, they didn't just wake up and go, hey, well, yes, there are some mentally ill people, but there's usually a motivation that's ingrained into them from their past
right.
or their living situation, or they had no other choice. I watched a fascinating documentary about how terrorist groups recruit, and they promise them meals, they promise them food, they promise them shelter for their family, they promise them safety.
Mm-hmm.
And they go into the areas where it's the worst, where people are, getting killed, bombed out, they're starving to death, they have no water, they have no way to protect their children. These groups go in and they promise them that, and all you have to do is do this for us. So if we can start looking at, okay, how did that person, let's rewind and find out why that person felt like they had to go be a part of this terrorist group. If we can stop that portion of it, there will be no recruiting. They won't be able to go to them, say, I have food. We can give you food. I already have food. We can give you shelter. I already have shelter.
Yeah.
We can give you safety. I already have that too.
Yeah.
They'll be no more effective than, the salesman coming to our door trying to sell us something we know does not work.
I was a high school English teacher in my previous life. And I taught in a very low income school, my first assignment right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a lot of kids would come in and out of juvie. They would be here, they would go, the next year they'd come back and whatever. And I remember I asked one of the kids, why do you keep doing these things? You know you're going to get in trouble. This is wrong. What are you doing? And he's like, when I'm in juvie, I have my own bed.
Mm-hmm.
I get to eat anytime I mean, there's 3 meals a day, plus they have snacks. I've got cable, and I have my own room.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I don't get that at home. And so that was kind of eye-opening to me, really.
My dad was a prison guard, a federal prison guard. He passed away a few years ago. But he said that 8 out of 10 of the men that he met in federal prison that were there for horrible crimes, they just felt like they had no other choice. They just felt like, at least in jail, like you said, they get their 3 meals a day. They don't have any bills. They don't, they felt like they belonged there and felt more accepted there than they ever felt on the outside.
Right.
And that's just sad. I mean, that like you said, that's just sad, and as a kid growing up, to go back to the part about juvie, as a kid growing up, I didn't have the best childhood, so I felt like acting out was the only way that I felt like I was being seen.
Right.
My teachers at school, the librarian at the local library, they appeared to care more about me than, people in my family did. So, I would hang out at the library for hours on end, just reading books, getting lost. Because I know at least there in the world that I had dove into, I was at least invisible and being told a good story.
Right.
At home, I was invisible and felt like I was never going to be a story. So I totally get that. I completely understand.
There was a song that came out, I think in the late 70s, maybe the early 80s, but it was the disco time period. Last Night a DJ Saved My Life. I don't know if you ever heard it or not, but
Yep.
it's all about, playing a song. For anybody who hasn't heard it, it's all about playing a song, and the song is what, saved your life, but it's got an upbeat disco, woo, woo,
Of course, because you had to have disco. You had to be upbeat. Even if you were talking about throwing yourself in front of a truck, you had to have that upbeat woo.
Oh yeah, because we got to dance. Anyways, I've always said that about books, that there are books that have come along in my life that have saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, most of them have been fiction books.
Mm-hmm.
And because I find a lot of times nonfiction books are very repetitive, and it's not very deep. It's very just kind of fluff.
Right.
But I feel like fiction books really, a lot of authors really try to dig in. And you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned one of your characters is a sexual abuse survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And one of your characters is a Black man.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that brings up a real interesting question in this day and age about sensitivity and triggers and sensitivity readers, and about authors of one ethnicity writing about with characters of a different ethnicity. And there are a lot of people who don't think that that should happen.
I've had some of that. And
so how did you handle that?
Whenever the book, the first incident was when I released the cover for book 4. It's called Murder. So a lot of people had a problem with that. They're like, not a lot of people. Most people were very accepting, because if they'd read me before, they know that I try to weave in real social issues into my stories. I don't hit you in the face with them. I don't preach to you. I don't lecture. But I believe we as authors have a responsibility to make sure that we can, if we can even very subtly highlight or put the spotlight on an issue that's dear to us, we should be able to do it. And we should try to do it. Even in our fantasy, even in our sci-fi, there's no reason think about, we were talking about Star Trek and even Star Wars. They dealt with different, social moral issues, but you were so caught up in the fantasy, you didn't realize you were getting a life lesson.
Well, even the original one touched on so many things.
Oh yeah, on so many things, because each planet, that there are each social structure they came across, they were having like, where everyone was the same color and this and that. And but you didn't realize it. You were so caught up in the fantasy and the storytelling that you realized you were being taught a life lesson.
Right.
So I want to do the same thing. So when the cover for Murder came out, I did get some flack. There were several people who said, I won't even touch that book because, you put a black man on the front. They had no idea what it was about. They combined murder and the black man and said, well, it's racist. It's like, you haven't even read the book yet. Don't judge it yet. Read the book. And I even offered I had some hate in my inbox on Facebook. And I said, tell you what, when the book comes out, I'll send you a free copy. And you can see how it addresses everything. With me being a creative type, and I'm very much into my world of the grid, I just see the characters as they are. When I decided to do Madness, because the books are about dark powers that, take over a person and they have to keep it at bay so it doesn't overtake mankind. Okay. So the first one is Madness. Let's talk about it. There's a white guy on the cover. All right. Does that mean all white guys are insane? No, It doesn't mean all white guys are insane. It means that one guy is having to deal with the dark power of madness and how he deals with it, right? Lust, okay, it's got a woman. Okay, so does that mean how women, are lusty and want to be, have sex? No, she's just the opposite. But you wouldn't know by looking at the cover. And then Cowboy, that's kind of a fluke. He was never meant to have his own book, but it kind of grew into a life of his own. But that's a white guy. And then, so it's like, I did not say Reno is a white guy, or Kinsey is a white girl, or Cowboy is a white dude. So why would I say Marcus is a black man?
Right.
That's just how I saw the character. That's just how I saw him. And the story changed throughout the months I was writing it, because I was getting flack left and right. I said, you know what? I actually changed the social issue. In Murder, it's supposed to be religious intolerance. And I actually said, you know what? You want this to be about racism? It's about racism. And I changed it to where they address it. And how Marcus is super nice. He doesn't understand racism, because why would anyone, judge a person by their color? God, the Omega created us all the same. He goes, I think you humans and your racism is stupid. You should all love each other and care about each other, And I think it was handled very well. I had several of my beta readers stuff that are people of color and read it, and they said, you did perfect. It's fine. And I don't want to say I'm colorblind, because I know that offends some people. You're colorblind. You should see our colors. When it comes to my characters, I'm colorblind. I just see them in my head. That's how they are. I don't even think I called him a black man anywhere in the book. I described him. He's on the cover. But I wanted to take people see beyond the color of his skin, see his story, see his background, see how badass he is, see how he loves, and see how he tries to recover and heal. Stop looking at the color of skin and look at the story that's inside of him, And I like to think I did it. It's funny, before the book came out, I did receive flack, but then once the book came out, it went silent. And I kind of like that. It's like the people who were ready to bash it and jump all over it, they didn't. They kind of faded away, because I'm hoping that they read the book and they realized, okay, she handled it. I was raised in the South. I'll be open with you. There's actually a blog post about this. I'm not telling you anything new. I was raised in the South. I was raised where the KKK had a lot of influence in my life, through my elders. And I thought that was just normal growing up, I was raised in the South where there was cross burnings, and KKK rallies and all of that. And I was exposed to very evil racism very early on, And I guess I was determined as a little kid that wasn't going to be me, you know.
Mhm.
And I remember the first time in school when I made friends with the new black girl in school. And my teacher actually told on me, told my parents, you know, I wanted to let you know, she actually sat down with her and da da da. I got in trouble for that. I got in trouble for trying to make a friend. And that just made zero sense to me whatsoever. So I've worked really, really hard to not be that person, you know, because I almost feel like it's genetics being raised in the South.
I think we're probably pretty close about the same age, or probably the same generation. But I'm
Mhm.
what I see happening is that our generation is kind of providing almost like a bridge where you have a world that our parents grew up in. I grew up in Texas. The town,
Same here.
the town that my father was born in had a white cemetery and a black cemetery. So even in death, the races couldn't mix,
Right,
which is so funny. And you're right. I grew up with subliminal teachings that this is okay.
right,
And I don't know. I don't like it. It would make me feel uncomfortable. And now we have this new generation that's coming up. They're at the other end. And for them, it's always been this way. They haven't had some of the teachings that we had, because I think we're trying to provide that change, that bridge. And
right,
we're learning too. I'm learning things. I mean, I never thought about some of the expressions that my father used as being racist until I started using them and saying them to other people, and they came back and said, "Do you know where that came from?" Oh no, I never. Oh, okay. And so it's we're learning how to do and how to accept people. And it's not just accepting people of other races, it's accepting people of other religions and other socioeconomic situations. We were in a low socioeconomic situation growing up, and so we clustered around people like us. And we
right.
had a different idea of people who were in different social economic circles. And it wasn't until I went to college and I was exposed to people who had more money and who even had less money that I realized that, oh my gosh, they have some of the same issues that I do.
Right.
So I have a lot of I feel really good about, like, I have a 10-year-old and an almost 13-year-old. And I feel really good about the world that they're going to be growing up in. I just think it's going to be fun to see.
I think it's going to be challenging. I think there's going to be, as the last few years have shown us, you know, things that, you know, the whole, well, that can happen. Oh, yes, that can happen. I mean, things can happen, you know, and the whole word precedent, you know, there's no precedent for it. That doesn't seem to matter anymore. You know, it's going to
Mhm.
happen the way it's going to happen. I think our younger generation has some very huge challenges in front of them. But yes, I like that they're so loud. I like that they have no problems expressing themselves. I mean, I cheered all the different kids from all these different high schools where they've had such horrible tragedies happen, and they had no problem saying their opinions and saying their thoughts.
Absolutely. That was after the Florida shooting, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Parkland, yeah, which I think the anniversary was yesterday.
Yeah, and
And
they organized like within 30 days or something in those
wasn't
huge
that
rallies.
amazing? And it
Yeah.
reminded me of the protests back in the 70s, you know, and when we were talking about, you know, trying to get civil rights and trying to get social justice. And it was like a resurgence of that in a way. And
Right.
I thought it was, I mean, I sit there and said, you go. I mean, and yes, they may just be kids, but we were all just kids one time, you know?
Absolutely.
And if we could start out our kids now where they're willing to protest, they're willing to say their voice, they're willing to stand up for other people, you know, and make change, I think that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's
Yeah.
what we need, because hopefully they will continue that fire. It'll still burn as they become adults, you know. So, I mean, there's some challenges, and, you know, and there's some negatives, and there's some, you know, bad things going on. But yeah, I feel pretty good. My kids are older than yours. They're all adults. But I love the fact that they were raised that you love everyone and you trust and respect everyone until they give you a real reason not to.
Right.
You know, you come at people, you consider everyone as a potential friend until they let you know, nope, that's not a friend you want to have. you know, because there's so many that like everyone is enemy and everyone is don't talk, you know, the stranger danger, I think is the worst thing ever. And my kids are great. There's no one they won't be a friend to. There's no one they won't help. You know, they're pretty cool. I mean, my kids are pretty cool. So I'm like, I did something right. I did something right there.
So this series of books you're talking about, what's the series
Back to the
called?
book.
What's the series called?
It's called the Shadow Keeper series.
Okay.
And the reason is the keepers are beings who kind of walk the line between good and bad. They have to maintain these dark energies like murder, lust, madness, but they also have to make sure they don't go too far into the dark, because they're the ones between everything that's bad with mankind, you know, just waiting to bubble up out of hell and take us all over, and everything that's good about mankind. The grid is all about keeping us in the light.
Is it available wide or just on Amazon?
It's wide. The first two books are in K. Actually, I think the first two books are in KU right now, so everybody get a taste. But then after that, it's wide.
And what are you working on right now?
I am working on book 2 of the Soulbound trilogy, and Soulbound trilogy is a very dark, very, very twisted book. It's a dark romance, but it's also got the paranormal elements in it. And it came out last year, and it's about a man fighting his own internal demons, only to find out they're real demons. All this time he thought they were his own personal demons that tormented his life, you know, because he was told, you know, you're crazy, you're insane, you know, you're off, you know, the problem is you, not everybody else. He finds out it is everybody else. And the demons he thought were inside are everywhere, you know, attacking everyone. And it's his job to help a person be relieved of that.
Is that the only thing you're working on right now?
Oh, that's never the only thing I'm working on right now. I have 2 anthology stories coming up, and I like to do a contemporary romance every year because I do have some romance readers. But even those are kind of twisted. I put real life histories. I mean, I've written a book about a man who found love from a wheelchair, you know, and another girl who her mother had a Munchausen by proxy.
Mm-hmm.
And used her to make it look like her daughter needed all this help when she really didn't. And that daughter wanted to live a life and find love. And the mother is just like, no, you're sick. She really wasn't. So again, I can't even do romances normal like everybody else. I have to always put all these twists in it. My fans are like, couldn't you just write us a happy, fluffy story? I'm like, you know, I tried and I failed. So yeah, but I mean, I'm working on 2 anthologies, The Shadow Keepers. The next book for the Keepers is Envy. You can guess what that's about. And then, you know, my secret project, which I can't tell you about till December. So, but I'll make sure you're the first to know. I'll say, hey, look what I'm doing. All right, I'll make sure you're one of the first.
Well, I want to thank you for stopping by and chatting with me.
Okay.
And we're going to wrap it up, but just stay on with me once we get stopped, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody, for watching another episode of Season 2 of Pop-Up Interviews. It's real important to subscribe and hit that bell and give me a thumbs up. That really means a lot. It not only feeds my feelings and my emotions and helps me get a bigger head, but it also is good for indexing when it comes to the notorious internet. So hit the bell, hit the thumbs up, and we'll be doing good. If you're interested in being on a pop-up interview, go to my website, terriawilson.com. It's Terri with 2 R's, just like the word terrific. And you can hit the link that says pop-up interview. There's a Google form you can fill out, and we will coordinate our schedules and get that happening. I will make sure to put all of Jazz's information down in the description for this video so that you can go buy all of her books, because you're going to want to buy them. You're going to want to binge all of them before this next one comes out, so that you can find out about the grid and about these supernatural beings and all this other good stuff that can change green lights, because man, would I like to change green lights. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.